Perspectives, Finding Common Ground, a podcast series that brings together a panel of thought leader perspectives as a forum to socialize and problem solve education technology issues with the goal to ultimately find common ground.
Hi, my name is Patrick Devaney, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this episode of Perspectives, Finding Common Ground. Today, we've got three wonderful guests, and the topic is professional learning and making it more sustainable or persistent through time. So I guess I'll start right away with introductions of the guests, and I'll just go around the horn on the screen the way that I see people. So I guess, Amy, we're going to start with you.
Amy Delpergo, I'm the CEO Executive Director, 15 years at NICE-Gate, which is the New York State Association for Computers and Technologies in Education. Prior to that, I was an administrator at several BOCES throughout the state of New York, and obviously affiliated with ISTE, ASCD, COSN, CETA, NICTEC, all the wonderful EdTech organizations, and I'm honored to be here.
Fantastic. Welcome, Amy. Glad to have you. Next.
Well, greetings, and thank you for having me. My name is Dr. Adam Fayel. I am the Director of Professional Learning and Leadership at Future Ready Schools and All for Ed. I am recovering technology director, as I like to say, from Covington, Georgia. I was at Newton County Schools for about 14 years there. Did some amazing work there. And I'm just really excited to be here today. So thanks for having me part of this conversation.
Welcome, Adam. Glad to have you here today. And last, but certainly not least, the remarkable Lisa. Lisa?
Oh, Patrick, thank you. Amy and Adam, it's great to join you. My background wasn't in education. I worked in publishing for many years, publishing and media, but we had a 17th anniversary for edweb.net just a couple of weeks ago, and that was prompted by my daughter showing me Facebook. And so this part of my career journey began when I said, well, we should start kind of a Facebook-like platform for teachers so that they would learn about it. Did that. And then for a while it was, what are we going to do with it? And I said, oh, well, it just turned into something we could use for professional learning. And so it's grown from there to a very large community, lots of webinars. So we got into it through, what are we going to do with a social network? So here we are.
Fantastic. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. I can say I'm friends with all of you, and I'm thrilled to have you here. We're very fortunate, and I'm sure you all have a lot of wisdom you can share. So let's start with the simple question. Professional development and professional learning. Lots of people kind of use those terms interchangeably. And I guess I would love to have your thoughts on, are they the same or how are they different? And Lisa, while you were going, why don't you go ahead and start with this?
All right. Well, I was thinking about this, Patrick, and I think professional development has over the long period of time that teachers and staff have needed, additional training, has just gotten a reputation for being sit and get, more traditional. So I think of professional development as being kind of old school, and the professional learning is kind of the rebranding of providing that support for teachers and staff. And also, we think of it too now where we talk about, well, if we want to differentiate learning for students, we should do it also for staff. So I think that the learning also ties it more to the concept that we're all learning, whether we're students or we're adults, and we're all engaging in a similar activity.
Yeah, I'll hop in. And one of the things at Future Ready Schools, we purposely use the term professional learning because it's one of our gifts, personalized professional learning, that we focus in on with a lot of our training that we do. And part of that is professional development. We look at that as that's the programming, if you will. You have a personal development programming. What the individual person is doing is actually learning. So we look at it as, professional learning is what the individual person is doing. We always talk about lifelong learning and ongoing learning. So education learning is this overarching concept, a theme that we have. So for it to be personalized, it needs to be learning, because no one says, I want to be developed. No one says, hey, I want to go develop somewhere. Now, you talk about developing countries or whatever. That's when I hear developing. But there's no stigma on learning. It's all about learning and becoming the best version of yourself. So, I lean more on the professional learning because I think that means the person owns it and it's personalized to them.
I would agree with that. I think that the main difference I see is that, professional development, and I agree with everything even Lisa said, with that it has an old school connotation to it. But I view professional development more along the lines of, let's say, ingredients for a recipe, right? So you're going to pick up the individual ingredients, but when you put that recipe together, that's the professional learning. When they all meld together and come up with a brand new recipe, obviously I'm hungry, so I'm going to have a lot of food metaphors today, but I think it's blending all of those pieces that you pick up along the way together, which ultimately, and I'm sure we'll get into that, every professional should have a professional learning plan in their document long term. So it does become sustainable, but those are the individual pieces that we pick up along the way. That's how I view professional development.
And I'll just say too that I've heard more people recently, because I think people often shorten it to PD, right? When you talk about PD, but I have heard more and more people use PL instead of PD, which is nice to hear that change.
Great. Well, this means if it's individualized, that my long list will stand out as me needing more than other people need, right? So we've been through that's helpful. It helps me make a distinction, one that I didn't necessarily have before. I think we've been through a lot over the last decade, and between, pandemics and technology deployments and all sorts of developments. And you all have different vantage points or perspectives on this. What have you seen by way of developments or changes? And I'd like you to kind of lean in a little bit on the most positive, or those that are kind of still holes in needs. And anybody can go first that would like to.
I'll hop in there. And one thing that I've seen, and I'm gonna take it from a perspective of how we handle professional learning when teachers come into schools. I've seen some districts, some places really understand that professional learning should be something that teachers are compensated for, that's a part of their schedule, that this is what it should look like. If we're asking you to teach or do lesson planning, then also professional learning should be a part of that. And it should be a scheduled out time for professional learning to take place to make you the best version of you. Because ultimately, the teachers, the educators, the staff that we have is the staff that we have. There's not a minor league of teachers that you can bring up. You're like, oh, give me that left-handed teacher out there and then bring in the game. I'm a baseball fan, spring training, yeah, we're getting there. But that's not the case. So, I think districts have really looked at the fact that, okay, there's a shortage of high quality educators because we're not seeing the students coming in to fulfill the way we want them to. So we have to develop the talent that we have. We have to do a better job of developing the staff that we have and to make them lifelong educators, if you will. So I'm seeing a transition to developing your talent that you have and trying to keep your talent in your spaces by developing these educators, even getting your paraprofessionals, converting them over to educators, by getting them in that system. So I'm seeing a lot of that happening.
I mean, our perspective is a little different in that we started using this social network for individual educators. We didn't come at it from this perspective of a district that has staff that wants them to be sure that they, are trained on anything in particular. I've just been amazed at the interest in individual educators who want to they were driven by a student need, but then, come to seek their interest in seeking professional learning to help their students. And we've just seen it grow and grow and grow. The biggest shift I've seen was with COVID. And when everything went, online during the shutdown, we had 15,000 people register for a webinar the first day of the shutdown. It was crazy. But I began to think of it more at what we do for online professional learning and offering more choice as something that a district might become more open to, and allowing the staff to make more choices on their own, do it virtually. So it means anytime, anywhere. Try to have ways to believe they're being accountable for what they're doing. But I think it's been a gradual process, but I've seen a real increasing acceptance for incorporating that kind of an alternative into a more traditional district professional development. I said, I'm using that professional development program.
I think, the only thing I'd like to add is that I think that I've seen a really big shift in collaboration and of educators working together, co-authoring books, co-presenting, even in an online environment, more team teaching. And I think that I've seen that shift since COVID. And I really think it has to do with that personal connection everybody wants, but it's also a little bit of safety in numbers as well. And I'm looking at like Cheryl and Donna and Frankie and Diane, they just obviously published their book on a national level. We have the same, groups, Laura Guion, Mary Howard, Amy Bloom on a state level. I just think that it's almost that, you find your pack and you work people want to be working in collaboration. And I'm seeing the cohort model really taking off in a lot of our certification cohorts as well.
Amy, I just want to jump on that because I agree, because our webinars, we've always from the beginning had open chats and people on webcams. I mean, this goes back 15 years. And during COVID, people really wanted to come on those chats and have an opportunity and talk to educators outside their district in their local area, around the country, around the world. So, and then all the presenters, their willingness to share what they know because they want to collaborate and put that out there. I don't know if there's any other profession where people are willing to share as much as they are of, what they know with others. It's really humbling.
Yeah, and if I can chime in on that as well, like one thing that I know we saw as well, I don't know, Georgia's one of those states that did this during the, going back in time now, during the recession, we saw a contraction of a lot of professional learning programs where those requirements were taken away from having so many professional learning units for certification. And so when those things happen, there was a pullback in some cases from like mandated professional learning, having so many credit hours. And in some cases, some of those teachers kind of lost some of their skill set, if you will. They didn't advance their skill set because it wasn't required anymore. They didn't have to have it for renewal or certification. And so as you mentioned with the pandemic, then it was this influx of, oh no, I got to get all this training in that I wasn't necessarily required to get previously. And so then all of a sudden, all these opportunities came out there. So one thing I hope that we are seeing with this transition is districts starting to move back to having some type of professional learning centralized requirement or person over it, coming up with these professional learning plans. Sometimes you just need that ringmaster, if you will, with professional learning to make things flow, to have those sit down conversations with your educators, to make sure that they have the right professional learning path and all your trainings aligned. Because not just your educators, but your support staff, because we sometimes forget about those folks in our buildings as well. That's like those secretarial staff, they need support on using Excel or Google Docs or AI programs or writing those emails. So ensuring that all people are part of our process.
That's great. I love the thought that this isn't driven just by organizational requirements, but also personally driven. And and it's very different. I heard personalized learning, and that's coming out in terms of how people are driving for it and how people are embracing it or pursuing it. There's also the question that the format changes a little bit. And I'm sure that you've gotten feedback about what people like about learning and how they like to learn. Can you talk a little bit about what the changes are in terms of preferred media or format, pace, or duration? And does that vary based upon who's making the request or who's asking?
I feel like Kendrick Lamar is saying there's too many options. But that's the thing, like right now with professional learning, there's so many options for educators to kind of grab what they need that it can be overwhelming and they don't know what to grab as it pertains to professional learning. I know the biggest complaint, of course, are the sit and get sessions that are provided. Also, the complaint are the video things that people have to watch. I think we've all have sat through the bloodborne pathogens, mandated reporter videos as educators. And sometimes, let's be honest, some people just play the videos, walk around their room and click in and answer those 4 questions and keep it moving. So I get those required, but that's not necessarily the best way to deliver that content. So, really when we are looking at how educators are wanting to have interactions with that content, it needs to be relevant. So whatever PL that they're doing, it has to be for where they are right now. So we're seeing more micro kind of PLs where, hey, I just want to know how to do this thing. So having those little bite-sized, almost TikTok reel chunks for educators, that's where we're seeing a lot of districts kind of moving in that direction, having those segments and tying it to a resource. So, hey, we're going to show you how to do your classroom setup and get students using their single sign-on with ClassLink. Let me just show you this quick video clip that you can embed into your lesson and give to your students. So seeing those kind of bite-sized nuggets is, I think, where a lot of districts are going, because everybody's like, I need something really quick. I don't want to sit down for an hour after school or before school or to do this stuff.
point counterpoint, because our audience, we do a survey every year and they just love the videos. They're all an hour long, but a big thing there is they use it to renew their state teacher's license, so they get a PD hour for that. So they definitely like being able to get that credit. Definitely prefer the engagement in a live session. But, and Adam, to your point with the compliance, everybody hates that, mandated compliance content. It's the same thing every year. They just kind of have to go through it. That's kiss of death. But, when the videos are presented by, on very individual topics that really relate to what they want to know and are done in all kinds of really interesting and exciting ways, and they can watch it while they cook dinner or listen to a podcast while they're driving or commuting, that flexibility is really powerful for a lot of people.
Yeah, then I think now teachers demand, on demand, what they need. They want to know what they need, when they need it, and they need to know where to go to get it.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important, and that's driven by social media and that immediate gratification that we all live within. Now, with that being said, I also think, it's the isolation versus collaboration thing as well. We run, obviously, like most states, our large annual conference every year. Numbers are an all-time high because I think people really like that gathering and the collaboration. So it's interesting when I was reviewing some of my notes for today, everything about the one-stop shop and the sit and get, the PD, turns its head with the conferences, right? In those one days. Yet at the same time, I don't think it's truly where the learning necessarily takes place. I think exposure takes place. I think a lot of networking takes place, a lot of collaboration takes place. And then finding it's all those little pieces that make that professional development plan when you pull that all together. And you also have, and I believe somebody mentioned earlier, there are multiple learning styles. We have to address that as well. Some educators, and I think there's an age factor involved. Some educators are great jumping on TikTok and picking up something in 30 seconds. I think some much prefer, the traditional model as well. It's a nice part about, what NiceGate does, what EdWeb does, obviously, and what you're do as well, is that there's so many options that are available right now. And it's just finding those pieces that work for you. And everybody's going to have a different plan along the way.
Yeah, I love the fact you brought up the conference component, because there's so many times where that's where people find their tribe, if you will. There's somebody like you at a conference. There may not be somebody like you in your building. You may be the one of one. You may be that one anatomy teacher in your district or in your entire region. But you get to a conference and there's like, oh, it's other anatomy teachers or whatever the case may be, shop teachers, whatever. And you're able to connect and share notes and find out what's working. So sometimes that professional learning, finding the audience around like-minded people is so amazing. I always tell people when I go to a conference, I learn just as much in the hallway as I do sitting in a session, because I'm able to find people, or somebody may lead a session. It's like, oh, I really like that idea. Let me catch them afterwards and pick their brain on something. So it's that piece as well that I think we need to promote with more educators, saying going to these events, but not just going and enjoying the after hours, but what are you taking from it? How are you able to take that and bring that into your role when you get back to your school system?
And then try what you're talking about. Again, I can tell you teachers that have collaborated on books, where they've authored books collectively. They have written statewide grants. And again, they're the ones that meet in that hallway. It's that the importance of that tribe, which is key.
Adam, I also love when you were talking about needing to find support for paraprofessionals and support staff and everybody. We hear more and more that districts really want to address everyone in the building with that. So they sometimes don't have the opportunity to go to a conference. They would love the opportunity to go to a conference, but it's nice that, all these different modes can make high quality professional learning available to everyone.
Are there any particular modalities that are better or worse for any particular role or stage? I mean, I heard, Amy, you mentioned some folks that are my age. TikTok is probably not very easy for them to work with, yet those that are younger can certainly embrace that method.
I think it depends, honestly, on the individual. What we have found great success with, in New York State, we're running, it's called Smart Start Grants. And we've been doing an awful lot of one-on-one coaching and mentoring. we have found that has made a significant difference. And even, like everything else, if you take somebody and you put them on a scale, your goal is to just move them along the scale, right? Move them along the continuum. And I think, again, it's everything we talked about, that exposure, that safety, finding the time for them. Patrick, there's no lack of resources that are out there. I mean, they're everywhere by every provider imaginable. It's really just finding what is relevant into each individual teacher and administrator. That's the key.
And then the word in the middle of the word cloud every time, whenever we ask questions about, is time. Mm-hmm. Right? Time, at every stage, right? The time to find something, the time to go to something. And recently I've also heard, like, we have to provide more time for people to process the learning, like when they've had a chance to, they've watched something, but then, you can't necessarily implement that immediately without thinking about it a little bit more and figuring out how you are going to apply that to your situation. So time is so huge. It's for the district, and kind of like, how do you get the time in the schedule to provide things? How do you as an individual find the time to work on something or figure out after you watched it how you're going to use it? It's just such a big issue.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm so glad y'all mentioned time, because that's something that we run into constantly working with educators. They're like, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. So it really has to be a decision that's made at the superintendent's level, where you are deciding to put into your people. Because we all know what the statistics tell us about why people leave jobs. And money, while it's great, is not the number one reason why people leave. Mm-hmm. They want to feel appreciated. They want to feel a part of something. So if you are valuing their time and compensating them for their time, whatever that compensation looks like, they feel that you're pouring into them and they want to be a part of whatever that's there. So what I've seen that has not been effective are the PLs that you force teachers to come in before school or stay late. Where they feel as though that they're not being, because if I'm in the morning, I'm thinking about those copies I need to print. Or, if I'm a science teacher or the lab I didn't need to go set up because I didn't get everything set up the day before. Or if it's after school, I'm thinking about picking my kids up or practice and all those things. So if it's within their workday and it's something that is designed, I have this work time to process it, to implement it, to work with my students, I think that's where the sweet spot is. So districts really should look at how the schedule looks for their staff. And we talk about planning periods, planning time, whatever that looks like, truly have that as professional learning time. When your schedule allows, whether it's once a week, twice a week, however you set that up, it should be dedicated professional learning time where you're working on something, whether it's breaking down your data, seeing how you can create activities that are aligned to the learning needs of your students. These are things that teachers want to have. Yes, they use that time to grade papers and just have that moment where you're just like, yeah, we've all been there. I get it. But if it's that structured piece and I feel that you're pouring into me and I'm getting something out of it, that makes people want to stay. That makes them want to renew their contract and tell their friends, hey, you want to come work here.
I also think, just to piggyback on that, Adam, I think districts need to offer choice, multiple modalities, so that the teachers or paras, they can choose what works best for them and have a variety of options, not just take this online correspondence course for an hour on bloodborne pathogens, like we were discussing. I think we all have PTSD over that.
Yes. Yes.
I think we could do a whole webinar just on time. And, we hear so many different examples from different early release days, PD days, where they try to get everybody to do it in the summer so they don't have to do it during the year. I mean, we should have like a wiki or something where we put together like all the different ways in which you try to figure out how you use time to give staff the professional learning support they need.
Yeah, because one thing that was so important, this was one thing I saw from our teachers. We surveyed them, and I hate to bring up the pandemic, but I'm sorry, I want to do it. Before we went virtual, I think our teachers had like a week or 2 weeks that was dedicated for them to develop and work on developing this virtual learning teaching space for their kids. And I had so many teachers tell me I felt so prepared for my students having that week or 2 weeks, whatever. I can't even remember how much time it was, but it was dedicated time where they met with the tech team to go over the tools and the curriculum folks. They had that time to really plan and develop and do those things. But unfortunately, in our traditional school year, we don't give them that time to do that. It's like they come back from the summer, It's they have an in-service here, they have to do this, open house, and then it's like, boom, start tomorrow. So having that time is so important to really having teachers feel comfortable and ready to do what's best for our students.
Well, I mean, we've got three great resources for folks to lean into and learn from. I'd like to shift a little bit and talk a bit about how do we make the learning more sustainable? We've talked a bunch about engagement and how do we engage a learner in the process of learning. But I think even just as important, maybe more so, is how do we get that to continue? How do we get that process to continue? How do we get them to come back? How do we get them to keep refreshing? Because ultimately, knowledge is somewhat stale. Once you've learned it, it's probably out of date pretty soon. And in order to really leverage it, you have to keep learning.
Well, it's one of those things where we really have to look at a way to, of course, make learning fun. Whether you look at some districts do it by gamifying the professional learning where teachers earn points. I saw this one district, they made it like Ready Player One where they had a big scoreboard and teachers were able to earn credits, which were points based on the classes that they took. And they could become a quote unquote expert teacher within that district. And by maintaining and earning those things, they had their badges that were outside their door and they got different rewards for it. Some of it was financial compensation. It wasn't that much, but it was basically saying, hey, you did this work. You're our top tier teacher. We're going to give you a little something. You have this banner outside your classroom because you've been able to do this stuff and you've been able to implement it. Not just take the training, but then turn around and implement it and then share out. And they were compensating the teachers who, after you did it, you decided to then share it with your colleagues, you were compensated for it. So I think some of that thing is creating an environment where you motivate people to take the courses, but then also to in turn share what they've learned with their peers, because knowledge is only good as who knows it. So developing those systems in place where as an educator, I feel empowered to then turn around and share what I've learned with my peers because I know these are good practices and this is what's going to be best for my building. So I think creating that kind of environment is so key to having sustainability when you start talking about your professional learning plan, because it all goes back to teacher self-efficacy, having that growth and as an educator, seeing where this path of growth is taking me, knowing that there's things that I can do where I can become the best teacher in the classroom, or it's going to transition me over to an academic coach or assistant principal, technology director, whatever my career pathways are. I think having that knowledge as an administrator is key to then growing your teachers to have that sustainability. If I know where you want to be at the end of your career, I should have a personal learning plan in place to get you there, whatever that plan is. If it is to be the best science teacher in the district, boom, I know it. So let's put a plan in place to get you there. If it's you want to become a superintendent one day, let's sit down and have a plan to get you there one day. So I think that's that sustainability, building those people where they want to go, not where you want them to go.
So it's personal, it's relevant. I think you said fun, which is, I think, most important. I need to be engaged. And, we're fortunate. We all work and live in a field that is constantly changing, right? So obviously now the buzzword, everything you hear is on AI, everything. You cannot take a single professional learning, professional development, you name it, it all has AI somewhere. There's a tagline, a buzzword somewhere. You've got esports right now, the whole gamification. Once you have that plan, Adam, what you have to know is it's going to continue to change and be flexible. That's why I love when you said at the end, my goal is to be the best science teacher. That's great. And maybe those steps change along the way, but that's your ultimate goal. And again, that's a personal, relevant piece. And I think when we finally hit the true power of technology, is how do we make it personal, fun, and individual?
Yeah, from our perspective, we have so much current, fresh content on so many topics presented by so many amazing educators that people just totally love the content. But then actually what we do as an organization is every week we're going out to everybody to let them know what's coming up new in the next week. So once somebody joins and becomes a member or watches one of our programs, they're constantly nurtured to look at what's coming up, and the choices are always so really great. And then when you combine that with some kind of incentive or a need, I suppose. So the highest participation is people in New York and Pennsylvania. They have a certain number of hours they have to earn. In New York, as you know, Amy, they have to earn their CTLE, credit. In Pennsylvania, they have their Act 48. or, folks who are your districts who are willing to say, if you watch this, a certain number of them over a certain period of time, you'll get comp time or something like that. That's what we see working best.
If I could add one more piece onto that too,
Yeah.
I think part of this is also with the individual educator being able to tie whatever that professional learning into directly impacting what's going on in the classroom. I think that's
Oh,
where when that
absolutely.
aha moment happens. If I'm a math teacher and I can identify an area that I have struggled with in getting to my students, and then there's this professional learning that's there that I could take that could get me better at that. Making that connection, I think, is huge. One, to be self-aware, to know that this is a gap that I have, or to have an administrator that's supporting me, that the professional learning doesn't look like a punishment. I'm not on a
Oh,
pip
no.
where I got to take this or I'm gonna lose my job, where it's like I'm working with you saying, hey, here's the gap. Oh, here's this really cool professional learning opportunity for you that I think would be really great. And getting, that person's like, oh, wow, I see that. Now let me do that. And then them seeing the results once they take it and seeing the change happening in their classroom. I think that's when that moment happens for those educators, and they get really excited about like, oh, it really worked. The professional learning that I took worked. Like kids are enjoying what I got. So I think that's when they get excited and then they want more. So, you have to kind of feed them a little bit. And then when they get it, they're like, oh, I like the taste of this. Give me more.
I think they know. I think we need to give them more credit too for knowing what they need and knowing what their students need, and then allowing them to make the choice. That's what we see is so powerful, and motivating. And the programs they love the most is when they say in the ratings afterwards, right at the end, they say, "I'm going to use this tomorrow." Like, I'm going to use this right away. And that's absolutely what they love the most, when they're getting something that they really can put to use and put to use in the classroom, like you're saying, Adam, right? Like, so they really see that impact on their students right away. They love that.
Those are all fabulous ideas. So we've got ways to engage folks, and we've got different methods of delivering them. And then we've got different criteria to keep them engaged and keep them learning. How about topics? How is that changing? And that could be both in a macro and a micro sense. I mean, is it across the board, or are you seeing pockets and things are changing based upon a district, a region, or some other factor?
I just think there's a huge shift right now to make sure that it's job embedded, that it could be utilized almost instantly in the job market. So if you look at any project-based learning company, we're working with the Buck Institute right now with New York City School District. It makes complete sense of what they learn. You can apply it immediately into the job force. And because I think what is becoming more and more acceptable is it's not the 4-year college degree is the only path anymore to vocations. So when you can apply that technology, again, turn on that light bulb for some of these students and give them a successful career path, that's magic right there.
So, Patrick, I would say, from when we first started 15 years ago, it was really about kind of using technology. Like, you could put iPad in the title and, or one-to-one or mobile learning, game-based learning, all of that kind of thing. And certainly during COVID, just put remote in the title, like the remote classroom, the remote English classroom, the remote math classroom, whatever. Now, the biggest thing post-COVID is mental health, behavior, social emotional wellness. So, I mean, we track huge numbers of the choices that our members are making, and mental health and behavior is really, at the top so much. But AI is up there. Science of reading, huge. So everything that's happening with the changing, the way we're teaching reading, and trying to think what else. Those are behavior is, a big one, dealing with student behavior or adult behavior, for that
Yes.
matter, and not just the students.
Or adults acting like children. Maybe that's
Yes.
Yeah. Early childhood is huge. And there's a big thing of going back to play, in the, post-COVID, particularly when everybody was rich. You could really see that trend of wanting to get those little ones back to just playing and, off of digital devices.
Even digital literacy, digital wellness, all of that, because Fortunately, unfortunately, we spent a lot of time on devices during the pandemic and even now. So, and talking with students across the country, they want us to give them guidance on how to use their devices. To give them that, okay, tell me when it's okay, when it's not okay, or give me the supports so I can build that within myself, so I don't need to be regulated by an outside party. But going to what you just said, Lisa, the adults need that as well, because we have just as many teachers that are swiping in the classroom as well, and principals in the hallway and everything else. So
Right.
I think one of the biggest professional learnings that I've seen uptake in is on the digital literacy, digital wellness. How can I get better at it as an educator, professional myself, just my personal, and then also then be able to support the students and parents so outside of school to do this as well. So that's that gap as well. So I need to be to the point where I can do it to some degree. Then I'd be able to support my students and the parents so we can have this whole village. So I've seen a lot of professional learning in that area as well.
All right, so I just have to say, as a grandparent, I am on Class Dojo for my grandson, and every time Class Dojo sends an alert, I am on my phone. I'm addicted. Great little app.
Well, that's great. We're running a little close to the end of time, but I think it's probably appropriate that we kind of summarize or finalize here a little bit with, what's next? Where is professional learning going? And what changes do you see coming or needed? Keeping in mind that what we want to do is make sure that it's not just effective at its onset, it's also sustainable, and we can find ways to continue to take advantage of those benefits.
One of the things that I see with a lot of this stuff now, and especially what we're seeing at the national level, is just being able to show improvement, whatever that is. If we are spending the dollars, the resources behind this professional learning, whatever this thing is, are we seeing the results? So I'm seeing a greater level of accountability behind these professional learning. If you're spending time away from students to go to this conference or at this location for this training for the day, what is going to be the payout? What's going to be our return on investment? Because we're putting money and resources into these educators, into the staff, whatever the case may be. So being able to quantify that, whatever that looks like, and it may not be, all of a sudden all of our kids are at the top 1% or whatever. It should be something where it's you're seeing the environment changing. You're seeing this holistic approach that's happening based on these various professional learning opportunities that we're seeing. But I do see a shift to more of an accountability type model where we're going to have to kind of justify what we're doing and how this stuff's working to our stakeholders, because everybody's kind of on the edge and wanting to see 5 bullet points of how things are working in our various spaces. So I think as educators, we just have to be a little more, attuned to being able to say, okay, we're doing this, but this is what we're getting out of it.
Adam, I caught your 5 bullet points. Yes.
It's got to slid that in there.
That was mine. Both Adam and Lisa mentioned AI. I think that the opportunity for professional learning is really just going to be tremendous because of all of the issues that AI brings up. And not just, we offer the deep bakes and items like that, but in critical analysis of resources, authentication of the sources, of, chat prompting, right? Or chat GPT prompting, engineering. I just think it's such a wealth of new knowledge base that everybody's going to need. And they're going to need it soon because the students are going to need that. Or the students are already there with many of those items. And to go back to our previous conversation, the whole mental well-being and wellness factor, I think the more and more our society is penetrated with AI, the more mechanisms we're going to need for balancing that mental health and wellness, especially at a student level.
And what we're doing, just unbelievable customization within seconds of creating playlists for that align to professional learning needs, whether it's for an individual educator or for a district or a school. Like, that's really unbelievable. That then if you have them document what they're doing, record the reflections are so important. There's the time again too, to not just watch a video, but take the time to write about your goals and what you learned and the impact on your practice and on students. And then AI can summarize that at any level and pull out observations, like use all of the staff to create observations about student need and what's working and not working, and use AI to analyze that is just really, we're beginning to do that. And it's really powerful.
It's really an acceleration of individualization is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
And so we're out of time, unfortunately. And I want to take a stab at kind of summarizing some of the themes that came out of this discussion today, because I think it's very rich. It's going to be a challenge to do it in short order, but let me give it a shot. And then you tell me what I'm missing. You tell me what I've gotten wrong. I think we started talking about professional development, professional learning. And I think the kind of common theme was there's a bit of a divide there between kind of a program versus an individual. And the thought here is that professional learning is really more about the benefit of to the individual, or the focus on the talent development of the individual. And that will also, it's driven both from the organization understanding that the individuals are important, but also from the individuals pursuing it themselves. It drives, when it's driven by the individual, it also drives more collaboration, which makes much of this learning richer, fuller, and greater opportunities. The modality is changing a little bit. It used to be more get and sit, and that is being pushed back a little bit in lieu of, or in exchange for, more bite-sized, on-demand, and collaborative type pieces. But most importantly in that, there has to include a factor of choice, or a component of choice. Because again, we're talking personalization. And it's remarkable that this isn't just personalizing learning for students in classroom, but for the educators themselves and for the adult learners. So the individualization is so very important. And time is such a huge factor. Time to do it, not as an add-on, but embedded in what they're doing. And then also supported. You're supported the time to go to the learning, but also to process the learning and find ways to apply it and leverage it. When we started talking about sustainability, there were some real clear themes there. It has to be fun. It has to be relevant. It has to be individualized or personalized in some fashion. It has to be available, kind of on demand. It has to be supported in that fashion. And I think I also heard some feedback. There has to be ways to see the value get delivered, or to recognize that it's important, whether it's somebody recognizing what was accomplished, or the individual recognizing how they're using that tool. And one of the things that I kind of missed in that is the individualization. There also is an incentive, so there has to be a personal desire or benefit from going through this. Topics. Clearly, we've made a shift from learning about technology to about applying technology towards other factors, to help with students or to help with mental health. It has to be job embedded, so that the topics are related far more to the specifics of what somebody is doing. Behavior, science of reading, AI, all are topics that are bubbling to the surface a lot more lately. And then finally, the future of this, it has to have immediate customization ability, and AI is going to be able to do that for us. We also need to have greater ties to the results, and we have to be able to better balance the technology of these modalities versus the mental health of those learning from them, because much of this is enriching their mental health, so they can't be buried by technology in doing so. What did I miss in that?
That was amazing.
Yeah, I think
Very impressive.
Cliff Notes don't have anything on you, Patrick.
AI, here we go. Let's go at it. You guys are fabulous. I love spending time with you anytime we get to do it. And I'm sure that everybody that has the chance to listen to this will appreciate your knowledge, your insight. And I look forward to the next time. For everybody listening, thanks for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you as well next time. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. ClassLink is proud to be the meeting place to facilitate these conversations. If you have a topic idea, send it to perspectives@classlink.com. To keep hearing our perspectives, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.